one of the most distinctive features about the timeline is that you can affect the timing of all of your panels. So if you'll notice here again, if I click on a panel, its length here is different than a panel in the same scene that's over here that's really small. And one way to change the duration is a very hands-on method, which is take our mouse and move it over the end of that particular panel on the timeline, and you'll see a little symbol there that allows us to click and drag to change the duration of the panel. So right now you can see that this panel, if I go over to the properties palette over here, under here the duration of this particular panel is 4 seconds and 4 frames. So I can change that over here by clicking on it and click and drag on those little handles, and now you can see that as I stretch it, it gets longer in duration, and as I shrink it, it gets shorter in duration. And as I do this, let me let go, and when I let go, you can see in the duration panel up here that is now 5 seconds and 17 frames, or a total of 137 frames. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to click here and drag, and it goes from 5 seconds 17 frames, and when I let go, it is now 2 seconds and 2 frames. You could see how the change in one view affects it in another view. So I can also just go directly to this duration area and type in, the number 9, and then press enter, and as I do, I could see that the duration has changed in the timeline. So they are dependent on one another. I can also change the duration of a panel by going up to Storyboard menu, click on that, and then go to Change Panel Duration. Click on that and a little window pops up, and as I do this right next to it, you can again see how it changes. If I want to change this from 9 seconds and keep clicking higher and higher up to 13, I press OK. Watch as the look changes in the timeline as it gets much bigger. It's important to notice that when I change the duration of a panel, it also affects the entire timeline, which could mess up your soundtrack or your timing of all sorts of things that you have planned later on. If you want to change the duration of a panel, but you don't want it to affect the entire remaining storyboard, you can change that duration and just affect its neighboring panel. So for example, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to do this by pressing the Alt key as I drag. So without the Alt key pressed, if I change the duration, it moves everything else like a big giant train. If I do press the Alt key and make that same change, it only takes or adds the time away from its neighboring panel. So now everything else isn't affected. And that's very important. If you'll notice on my soundtrack down here, I'm going to right click and show the waveform. If I were to change this panel, it would move all the rest of my dialogue out of sync with my soundtrack. So to solve that, I will just use the Alt key, use that as I move, and it's not going to mess up the timing for the rest of the track.